Welcome to the Fantasy Six Pack IDP podcast. Today we're going to discuss Dynasty Lineman rankings. I'm your host, Steve Hungarter. I'm a writer over at the Fantasy Six Pack and IDP guys. I'm also an ECR ranker on Fantasy Pros. I'm going to tell you this is no easy feat today. So I brought in the guys from Front Office Pros. Now I know what you're thinking. In the audience at home. You're like, which one did you bring? Did you bring Joe? Or did you bring Steve? And the answer is, my friends, why not both? Why not double our pleasure? Why not have vanilla and chocolate? Let's double down on some Front Office Pros. Okay? How you doing, guys?
Great, Steve. Great. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're with me because, like I said, whenever you're talking Dynasty, it's very speculative. People don't know, but I'm really glad that you guys were able to come on the show. We got a good lineup over here. We got award-winning rankings. A lot of people come over here for our chat, for our Discord. We actually got a promo going right now. If anybody wants to try the promo, it's F6P MLB 24. That can be applied to a 15% off membership. That promo code is F6P MLB 24. But back to you guys. What have you guys been up to?
Well, we're right in the off season, so we're just trying to. We create, 3 videos a week. We try to. Honestly, for me, I know Joe is maybe a little bit more sentimental about the football season coming to a close here, but I like the off season. I notoriously will tell you that I actually enjoy the NFL draft more than I do the Super Bowl. Hot take. So this is my time here. I enjoy the free agency. I enjoy the draft. I enjoy along for the ride.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you're right. I am sentimental about the season coming to an end. But as far as our podcast goes, like the 18 weeks, man, that's a grind for the regular season. It's kind of nice to mix in this off-season topics. Keep things a little more upbeat and fun and enjoyable going forward. We can talk about a bunch of different things in the off season. Where in season we're kind of constrictive there.
I'm like that with my leagues. Like, I'm more active in the off season because this is really the only time you have any power. You know what I mean? The season's going to go. There used to be this video game before us. It was like you played on a big pad and you wind up your guys and they just do what the heck they want to do. We have no control. We have control of the off season. Did I tell you guys I'm a big fan of your show?
Yes, no, we have heard, and we're very appreciative of your support.
Yeah, I listen like every day going to work, and this may make me sound like a douche. I don't know, but I don't have time during the regular season to listen to other people's content because, like Joe will tell you, the great Joe Bond over here at the Six Pack, he's a number 3 ranker on all the Fantasy Pros for offense, and he's got an award-winning team, and that's why that promo code I think is so important. The F6P MLB. 15% off membership. But like I said, we got an award-winning team over here. And then, I do the defense. And a lot of us over here, I got a top 10 rank, we got a top 4 ranker and so forth. We're always over here grinding. And we got to have our rankings out before anybody else. So even when by the time I hear a podcast, it's like, dude, I'm in the middle of the week. I'm trying to get my waivers out on a Sunday, trying to get my rankings out on a Tuesday. So it's hard. You guys do the same thing I do. You guys are right there, right ahead of everybody else. So I just appreciate the hard work and effort. So I love listening to your podcast in the mornings.
That is awesome to hear, Steve. We do appreciate it. And I got to give you credit where credit's due. Joe and I we wanted to get into the ECR with Fantasy Pros. We started doing that. I think you and I started doing it for the first few weeks, and honestly, we fell off. I mean, with everything going on, something that we definitely want to try to do, but it's just one of those things. I think we were trying to create our own projections heading into the season. I know I was able to scramble it all done, Joe. I think you lost steam, but we started. we didn't give enough time for ourselves, and it was crunch time.
Yeah, we started way too late in the off season, and then we got ahead to get all geared up and ready to go to the Fantasy Football Expo in the summer. And just between everything with the new season starting and everything else, just didn't have the time. But
man, it's a grind. Like, I'll tell you, like that Thanksgiving weekend, I did a podcast on a Wednesday, and then we had 4 Thanksgiving games and a thing on Friday. I was like, holy cow, I can't keep up with it. So I probably lost points in there. But yeah, it's an incredible grind, but it's worthwhile. It's worth doing. Question for you guys, because like I said, I listen in the mornings. and not just the information you give, but the banter. It's almost like you two fight like brothers. Is there a background story to that? Like where does that vibe chemistry come from?
Oh yeah, it comes from the fact that Steve and I have been friends and grew up with each other since the first grade in grade school, and we were in a lot of the same classes, hung out. So in a lot of ways, we are the brothers from another mother, so to speak.
It's interesting because even in high school or school in general, people would say like, "Are you brothers?" We look kind of similar, maybe not completely. And it's funny because even back then, Joe and I would be talking about NFL and fantasy football. And, there would be, our fellow friends would be like, "You guys still talking about fantasy?" And me and Joe are just, talking at the lunch table, talking just, him and I were just on a whole nother level.
Is that where you got the name Front Office Pros from?
No, that one was more so, with everything we're trying to do at Front Office Pros, for us, we're trying to mirror the front office. So, a lot of times the stuff that we talk about, we're talking about Dynasty. We're talking about, we are involved in like salary and contract leagues. We really enjoy that. And that adds a whole nother element that, kind of puts it more into the perspective of what it would be like to be a general manager. I think that's a part of the fun in managing a fantasy football team. None of us are going to be general managers, but it kind of gives us the opportunity to kind of build our own team and try to win a championship. So for us, the name just kind of, we actually went
never
a couple
say never.
names.
You guys are young.
Well, that'd be pretty cool. Cool.
Uh-huh.
That would be cool. I mean, we've all been there as fans. Like, we can do a better job than our current GM than the NFL teams. So,
ain't that something? That's the truth. Like, you can look at numbers and be like, wait a minute, why are they doing this again? Why are they taking this quarterback? It's so funny. I know you guys are familiar with offensive age cliffs. I did this last week with Joe. Like, when to get off a running back, when to get off a wide receiver. There's very few information out there about IDP in general. So I actually wrote the article. And it's on our site. In fact, it's going to be attached to this article that we're doing, Dynasty linebackers and defensive backs and defensive linemen. It's going to be on that. It's going to be on there. So you're welcome to look at that as well. But when you're looking at Dynasty, as far as a true stash, true potential, this is kind of where I'm basing my rankings off of, and feel free to jump in there. But when I'm looking at a defensive lineman, I'm looking at the prime age of 24 to 29. 24 to 29. So there's two historical, I guess, science data for this. 24 to 29-year-olds are at their peak value, okay? Around 30 years old, 30 to 32, you're still going to get value out of them. The cliff happens around 33. That's when you want to get off a player super quick. If you want to be cheeky about it, maybe 31, 32, start selling them. So everyone on my list, for the most part, is within that range of 24 to 29, if that makes sense. And then here's the second fact I found just pulling data. You top redraft, the Aiden Hutchenson, the Will Anderson types. Usually those guys will overcome the odds. Hence, that's why they're the top player. Usually guys will overcome obstacles and they'll peak a little early. But if you're looking at true peak value for a defensive lineman, 24 to 29 is your age group. Now it's different. It's different for defensive tackles. We don't have any defensive tackles on this list, but just for my audience at home that geeks out about this stuff like I do, defensive tackles, the ripe age is 26 to 28. Okay. The drop off starts to happen a little bit at 29, but they hold value from 32 to 34. That you can jump off those guys later. I guess the expression there would be, you want the old man strength for a defensive tackle. Now there's always rules against that. There's always, this guy overexceeded, like Bobby Wagner's a classic name. He's been doing it for years. But just as a rule of thumb, if we're in Dynasty, I hold those guys at a higher regard than others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think age cliffs are very important. I think for edge rushers, they can play pretty late in their career. I'm not I am not as scared per se, really saying. And when you have like a player who's like really, really good, then they can defy the odds. I'm trying to think of guys like Terrell Suggs played for a long, long time. I think Julius Peppers played for a long, long time. So, I mean, I think some of these players who kind of have that stature can play for a very long time. Even a guy like, he fell off this year, but even a guy like Cam Jordan, I think he's pretty older now, but he's been
Good
relevant
example.
for a very long time.
That's a good example. So, you know, when the immortal Joe Bond said, "Hey, let's do a Dynasty video," that's what I was looking for. I was looking for who can I stash, who can I play at peak values. So you'll see, guys. I mean, you can get a lot of value out of, well, one guy that didn't make my list, and this may be controversial to you. Before we pull the list out, I'll tell you who's on my bubble. Daniel Hunter, I have ranked 11. Okay, Daniel Hunter, who's been a beast. He's been phenomenal. In the article, it'll disclose he's been a top player for years, but you know he's getting a little older. So Daniel Hunter's on the bubble, but I'm not as concerned with. Guys, he's going to be a free agent next year, right? I don't know what team scheme he's going to go to. He may be a hand in dirt player like he usually is, or he may be a 3-4 linebacker. I don't really know. So for right now, as an honorable mention, I put Daniel Hunter on the list. Just because it's a question mark, just because I don't know the future. You know what I mean? So he's on my bubble. The rest of these guys are a bit younger. They got more longevity. So that's why I have it ranked the way I do.
I actually think that is kind of controversial, Steve. And I would personally have Daniel Hunter in the top 10. You know, he's coming off a 16.5 sack season for the Vikings. I understand he's a free agent, but, you know, he's still relatively young. He's 29 years old. He's still kind of in that sweet spot. I like Hunter, and if I'm not mistaken, I know Mike Zimmer was the coach. I believe Mike Zimmer was a 4-3, more defensive scheme.
4-3, yeah.
But I believe Hunter has played that outside linebacker role in his career. So I think he can play both. I think this guy, I mean, the neck injury is what scared me a couple of years ago. And that's when I was like, I don't want anything to do with him, but he's come back and he's done really well. So I actually think he's deserving of the top 10. Not sure if my counterpart, Joe, here agrees.
Yeah, I'd agree, Steve. He'd be in my top 10. I do think it is a fair point to be a little concerned about where he goes in free agency. I'm a big proponent of where players go, but I think just with his talent, I think he can fit in schemes, even if he switches teams. He's even shown, like, even in Minnesota this past year, he didn't have the best guy opposite him, but it just didn't matter. He still produced. So I believe in his talent, and he's not quite at that age cliff yet. So I think, you know, depending on where he goes, he should be in the top 10.
You guys would have hated me last week because when I did the linebacker thing, I had Patrick Queen at 11 on my bubble. And it's the same premise. I just don't know where they're going to land. I can't quite gauge it. So let me put the guys in here that I could gauge. Maybe let me put the guys in here that I'm trading for at the moment. But yeah, I guess the key word is, Steve, like you said, deserving. He does deserve, and he's probably better than some of these other guys. But as far as that peak, how many year value that I have, that's why I kind of have him a little bit down further. I mean, none of these guys here, I'd love to have any one of these guys. Without further ado, let me show you who number 10 is. So for number 10, I put Brian Burns. Okay. Brian Burns is coming off one of those bad years. I guess we can say, what, a mulligan? Let's give him a mulligan. That whole Panthers team had issues that whole year, okay? As he approaches this offseason with the Carolina Panthers, there's a high probability of him being tagged as a franchise player. Consider them building around him, okay? He's still young enough. He's 25 years old. I mean, shoot, I anticipate a rebound year out of him, but the talent's there. He's a competing factor. What says you about Brian Burns?
You know, I think based on this past year, Steve, I would not have him in the top 10. And based on the same logic, I know you did not have Hunter in the top 10 because he's an impending free agent. Burns is an impending free agent, like you mentioned. I think Burns is a little overrated. Yeah, his best season is 12.5 sacks. Other than that, he hasn't had more than 10 sacks. He reminds me kind of a Montez Sweat type. He's good. I don't think he's great or elite. And if you're in this top 10 group, to me, it says a lot. So I would put Burns outside the top 10 for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy I would have probably traded out for Danielle Hunter for sure. But I get the argument for him being in here. He is 25, like you mentioned. and there is potential. There's a lot of other people I know. We talked to some other people, and Brian Burns was on the buy low list, and they believe in a potential breakout this coming year.
Exactly.
So the ideas and stuff is definitely there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but do you think though that he's gonna? I mean, he didn't really do all that well in Evero's defense. Evero's coming back. Does that you think that really makes sense there?
Well, what if he switches teams?
So there's a thing. There's a thing called recency bias. We're all thinking about this year, but if you remember 2 years ago, he was like a top. Let's buy him now before the season even started. So some of these younger guys, you got to give them kind of a mulligan. You got to give them a little bit of a mulligan year sometimes. You know what I mean? But everybody was on him last year. This is the time to actually buy now. Buy on the low, sell on the high sort of thing. But yeah, if he goes to another team, good. If he doesn't and they franchise tag him, that means they're committed to him. They're going to throw money at him, right? They're going to build around him. So to me, it's a win-win. As opposed to Hunter, I really don't know where that's going to go. We know Hunter has the injury tag throughout his career. You know what I mean? Burns doesn't really have the same thing. He just had that one bad year. So I don't know. Apples and oranges. I'm a fan of Hunter. I just didn't want to put him on this list just for the target segment of my article. So number 9, I got Will Anderson. Now, granted, I know Greenert probably had a better year, but Will Anderson as a product, as a clean product, as a prospect, okay? He's the only rookie on my list. But hey, let's look at it, okay? In that limited amount of time, not only did he make the Pro Bowl and he won Defensive Rookie of the Year, he had an impressive season. And it didn't even stop there, guys. He had an amazing rookie season with the 45 tackles, 67 pressures. That's what I want to hammer home. 67 pressures in just 13 games, okay? Now, he only finished with 7 sacks, but still, I mean, geez, for the Texans, that's a franchise record. That's the most sacks that team has ever had. Guess what, guys? He's 22 years old. So he's a little bit ahead of his peer group as far as the advanced metrics that I was trying to put together here. But it might be the last time. This is why he's on my list right here. This may be the last time that somebody can actually buy him before he's a top 5-6 guy. So I got him at 9. What do you guys say?
In my view, you got him too low, Steve. I am a Will Anderson fan. As Joe can attest, in our one, our big league that's got 16 teams in it. It's got salaries and contracts. He was a guy I was targeting. I thought he was a blue chip prospect, and I was able to trade into the first round and get him, and I was super ecstatic, and I'm so glad I did because I think he is the next. He's going to be that next era of defensive end, I believe. I think he's going to be in, like you said, I think he's in the top 5. As an owner of Will Anderson, I don't really know what you could do to trade. I mean, unless maybe, we talk about I'm going to win now mode. Maybe you give me
Right.
TJ Watt, maybe, but I don't even know. I'm not looking to sell this guy. I think this guy is a very strong player moving forward. And I'm excited. The reason why I went and got him was because I thought this group of defensive ends for the 2024 class is going to be weak, and I believe that is the case. I do like Jared Verse, but he's no Will Anderson.
On that note, I did an IDP rookie mock the other day, and everyone's hot on these edge rushers. After the top 4, I'm all about the interior linemen of this class. Like, I'm not that big of a fan of the edge rushers or the linebackers, but anyway, Joe, what says you about Will Anderson?
Yeah, I knew Steve was going to have an issue just because he is super high on Will Anderson. I think I don't really have a problem with him at 9. You could have put him a little higher up ahead of some guys you're going to be talking about here, but the fact that he's in the top 10, definitely deserving of it, and I definitely agree with you. Like, this will be the lowest he's going to be because I think he's just going to take that next step this upcoming year.
He's going to fly off the board, and there's a couple guys in here that are going to fly off the board. I actually thought I had him a little too high because there's some people out there that are kind of mixed matched on him. I'm like, no, I know he only had 7 sacks, and most of these guys are in double figures, but you got to look at the whole spectrum. Are you a Texans fan, Steve?
I'm not. At one point, I did like them quite a bit. I was searching for a team. That was after Michael Vick and the dogfighting incident. I was left wondering what team. I can't be a Falcons fan anymore. So I went local, like I should have done from the beginning, and I'm a Bills fan now. True.
So speaking of controversial, and this name coming up, you either love him or you hate him at number 8. Number 8, I got Kayvon Thibodeaux. Now, I don't know if you guys remember during the season, he was on this record-breaking 20-sack pace like halfway through the season. Then he kind of went away a little bit. And that's kind of his game. He's kind of sack dependent. But again, at 23 years old, getting ready to hit this peak ages, Thibodeaux started the season red hot. He actually had 8.5 sacks in 8 games. I don't know if you remember that. That was like the top of everything. He's one of the biggest youngsters coming out. Even though he simmered down a little bit, he ended the season with 11.5 sacks, nearly triple his sack count from his rookie year. So, I mean, I think all that's kind of noteworthy considering what he's been doing. So I want to say his ranking, he was tied for 12th in sacks. So, giving his durability and his youthful age, I would definitely put him on my list. I kind of wanted to put him higher because here's why, guys. I'm a big heavy snap count guy. He was logging 90% snaps. Did you know that? He was logging 90% snaps throughout the season. Yeah, him and Maxx Crosby were right up there doing it. So, again, for a young guy like that's kind of unheard of.
I think you have him in the right spot. When it comes to Thibodeaux, when the draft class came out, I was higher on Thibodeaux than I was Hutchenson. I think Thibodeaux is more explosive. I think Hutchenson has a better motor. I think that's to me kind of the bigger differences between the two. But and Joe, I'll give you credit on this one. You've kind of convinced me of this. If you look at the underlying metrics and stats of what Kayvon Thibodeaux did, it almost seemed like he kind of, I don't want to say lucked into some sacks, but it just so happened that, if you look at his other stats surrounding the sack numbers, it's a little bit concerning. He didn't really get much help, so on the other side, and Azeez Ojulari was a no-show. So he didn't really have anybody on the opposite end. So I like Thibodeaux. I think Anderson's better than him. I would have him higher. But I did really like Thibodeaux, but he kind of took a little bit of dip, and I attribute that to you, Joe. You convinced me.
Yeah, this is the guy I would have had Will Anderson over. Okay. Like you said, you either like or hate this guy. I've never been this big of a fan of Kayvon Thibodeaux. Just felt like he was a type of player, almost like the Jadeveon Clowney type, where they can be really explosive when they want to, but they just don't play that consistently all the time. And you mentioned playing similarly to snap share to a Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby and the Hutchinson in the world have this great motor. They're just relentless. And then, like you mentioned too, Kayvon Thibodeaux, it's all about the sacks. Didn't really like his tackle floor that he just is just not there this year.
Yeah, people are hit or miss on him. Out of everybody in these top 10s, he's usually one that moves around a little bit. So okay, good. For my number 7, I'm not going to give you a lot of analysis, but I am going to make a statement. For number 7, this guy is very underlooked. People don't pay him attention. Maybe it's because it's Jacksonville. Josh Allen plays for Jacksonville, and it's a smaller market. I'm just going to say a couple things right here, okay? All right. For Josh Allen, okay, he's in his prime window right now. He's 27 years old, okay? Doesn't get any better than this, okay? Do you think he had more than 10 sacks this season?
I know for a fact he did.
How about 15?
Yes, he did
more
than that.
How about 16?
More than that.
How about 20? I'm being funny.
Not as much.
How many sacks do you think he had in the season? I had to look it up because I really didn't know. I just know he's in everybody's top 7 or 8.
Yeah, I don't really know either.
I did some prep before the show, so I know depending on it's PFF or not, but I believe it's 17.5.
You got it. Ding, ding, ding. Right in the money. I had to look that up before I wrote the article. I'm like, wait, he had what? Because out of all the guys that are in that 17.5, those higher ups, we all know who those guys are. But Josh Allen's kind of like the redhead stepchild. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't know who that is. Unless us guys here, we're fourth and down, we're grinding in there. We know our players, but I had to put Josh Allen on this list somewhere, and I think 7 feels good. What says you?
Steve, you might have to defend your case a little bit more here. I think you are a prisoner of the moment here, and got some recency bias with Josh Allen. There's no denying what he did at 17.5 sacks. Before that, his rookie year, he had 10.5, and he hasn't sniffed 10 sacks other than that. I'm a little concerned about him. I don't know if he's going to continue with this pace. He's an impending free agent himself. More than likely, I think Jacksonville's not going to let him go. They'll probably franchise tag him. But I don't know. I'm a little worried that it could be a little bit of a flash of the pan. I would have Anderson above him as well.
Man, you'd have the rookie over a guy that's kind of proved himself and coming off this big year. I think I like the spot for Josh Allen at 7. As a guy that I've kind of had a couple of times in Dynasty and traded him away.
Traded him away. That's the key there, Steve.
Traded him away, but I didn't see 17.5 sacks coming this year, and he is in the prime here. Who's to say he doesn't continue to build off of this now that he's matured and been in the league a little while here?
I mean, he's in that window. And then, like I said, this whole ranking, I'm on the same pace as my belief and my assumption that they will franchise tag him and keep him there, because they're teetering, competing. So why wouldn't they? But again, like I said, this is the offseason. Anybody can move around, whatever. But where would you guys put Josh Allen?
If I had to say, I probably would put him 10.
10? Okay, so
I would put Danielle Hunter over him. I would put Will Anderson and Kayvon above him.
Interesting. I don't know if I'd I don't know. I don't hate the 7 spot where you have him here compared to these other players. I like he's a younger player than Hunter, so I don't know if that would make sense for me. So I think your spot at 7 is fine.
Gotcha. And again, like I had to put him in somewhere between, and I'm like, okay, he's more established than Thibodeaux, and Will Anderson's a rookie. We're probably going to have a little bit of regret, but he's still in that window, like I said. So that's why I put him at 7. I thought 7 felt good. Now this is the part of the list where I get really excited. For number 6, I got Aiden Hutchenson, and let me just backpedal this logic, okay? Aiden Hutchenson, who's ahead of his prime window, mind you, okay? In the final 3 games of last season, this is usually where people check out anyway, right? The final 3 games of the season, he led the league in sacks with 5 and pressures with 20, okay? That's just a small sample size, but these are kind of things I look at. For 23 years old, he's already getting the pressures, he's already getting whatever, and he's actually, closing in on those deals. So it's no secret that team went to the, playoffs and did very well like they did. Now, here's where I go a little loopy. This is my conspiracy theory, guys, okay? I think Detroit is going to invest heavily on the defense, okay? There's a couple spots they can go in this draft. It's either going to be an edge to complement him, which I'd really like, or it's going to be that corner situation. They need to fix that. They need to figure it out because that was clearly a weakness. So, it's no secret they want to run the ball and play defense. So I think they're going to get him a partner, whether in free agency or draft, other than McNeil. But I think Hutchinson is going to be the last time we're going to see him at 6. He's on the rise. I got another pod I'm doing in a couple weeks with Aaron St. Dennis over at the Mad Scientist, and he's my boom prospect. We're going to do risers and fallers. That's my riser. I think at 6, this is the last time we're going to see him at 6. I really do. What says you guys?
Well, get ready for the Aiden Hutchenson fan club coming up here after me. But here's the thing. I'll give a dose of reality to Joe here when it comes to this former Michigan player. I think he's overrated. I think that Hutchinson is a solid player. He's good. I don't think he's elite. I don't know if he'll ever get to the point of being elite. I think he's a good hustle player. He'll be. I think where you have him is correct. Although I do think that Will Anderson will surpass him in not too long. But when it comes down to Aiden Hutchinson, I'm laughing here because I know Joe's just going to absolutely tear me apart.
He's like a pit bull down there. He's licking his chops. You better watch out, yeah. Steve.
Well, I just know Steve. Steve is all about the flashy guys, and that's exactly what Will Anderson is. He's got the speed, he's got the bend, and he's got the pizzazz for you. Aiden Hutchinson, man, he's just a grinder. He's got the motor. He's working on the moves. He's working on spin moves, and I tell you what, he's going to keep working on this craft and continue to get better. And I think the similar rise that Maxx Crosby's had, and they're really similar players, I think that same thing is going to happen for him. I mean, we already see it. His sack numbers may not be there, but the pressures were there. And just so happens, to your point there, Steve, as well, if he gets a guy to running mate opposite of him, I mean, look out for this guy.
Yeah, but his tackle floor is not nearly as high as what Maxx Crosby is.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point.
True. I don't know who's as high as look, Hunter, Crosby, Granderson. We don't got too many guys out there we can say that, you know.
I think a lot of that is Lee McNeil and the guys that they got in the interior as well, coming up and making those stops.
This is more of a, like I said, Dynasty is so fun to kind of play because it's almost like a Christmas present to yourself. You know, you want to open up that present. It's a speculative stash, right? I just don't see what the Lions got to build that defense, and they got to build it around him. And he's already popping. And Joe, you said it yourself. This whole year, he's been all about the pressure. He's been getting the pressures, been getting the bend, getting the pressure, getting in there. He hasn't really been closing the deal. Then those last 3 weeks of the season, I want to say it was the Cowboys game. Yeah, it was the Cowboys game. 88% of snaps, 5 tackles. Okay, whatever. 3 sacks is what we want. The forced fumble. Then he had 2 the next week. You know, he's getting the pressure. He's getting the sacks. I see it. Again, there isn't really anybody else on that team. I mean, are you really afraid of McNeil? Who are you afraid of? Who are you double teaming on that team? You know what I mean?
Yeah, to your point, that's why they got to get somebody opposite of him. And I think that's more important than addressing the corner spot. To me, getting the pressure solves your problem. It's easier to cover on the back end if the quarterbacks have less time in the pocket to throw.
Mm-hmm. I got to hear how you guys take my number 5 because I was going to put him 4. I was going to put him 6. I even thought I had to put him at 5. So for my number 5, and this is a little bit, if it was a redraft, I'd talk a little different. But for number 5, I put TJ Watt. And again, we're playing Dynasty here. We're trying those metrics. He's 29 right now with an injury past. He's turning 30 in October. That's around the corner, guys. We are starting to climb that for years territory, whether you guys play that on. But to me, you might want to consider him a sell candidate soon. I know it's not a hot topic to say, but with these defensive linemen, when they fall off a cliff. I'm not saying he's falling off this year or next year, but had these been redraft rankings, I probably would have put him 1 or 2, you know? So, but that's what I'm doing with Watt here. I'm looking at him as far as age. I'm looking at him as far as injury and the potential success of that's a player that I can move on and I can rebuild a dynasty team around. That's what I would do. So I'm not bagging on him. I'm just saying I would put him comfortably in the 5.
Interesting, Steve. I thought you had it right, but I'm going to disagree with this one. I think we haven't talked about the player yet, but Myles Garrett is 28. I got to tell you, I think TJ Watt has gotten some massive disrespect. I'm not a Steelers fan, and Joe would know. Steelers are my least favorite team, so I am not the guy to have any sympathy for the Steelers. But I think this guy has gotten mad disrespect. I mean, I believe he is the best defensive player in football. We call him in our league. I feel like we call him the cheat code because he's the type of guy on defense that could literally win you a game. So I get it from a dynasty perspective why you wouldn't have him in the top 3. But I personally think that of those guys who are older, I have Watt over Garrett.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't hate the spot at 5. I think you make a good argument with the age, the injury history, and like you said as well, I mean, if you want to sell this guy, this is the time. You're going to get the most amount of capital. You're buying him? Well, that's fine. But if you want to sell him, you're going to get the most right now. Say you don't, and you wait till next year, and then he gets hurt again. He's got another, injury-shortened season. Being that he's going to be 30 years old, you just lost your chance at getting a lot for him.
You say that though, but what are we talking about? What you're selling? If it's 75% discount, then sure, I'm interested. But if I'm going to have to pay full price, I mean, what am I selling here?
Well, I just try to sell high, but
he kicks the hubcaps.
What was that?
So you kick the hubcaps at the dealership, don't you? Before you buy the car, you make sure it works.
I don't know about that, but I just, in my view, here's the thing: it's like this guy, he's going to perform. I'm not as concerned about the injuries when it comes to him.
Interesting. I mean, we saw it kind of with his brother. That's kind of happening, and it's starting to happen with TJ. He just plays so much, but there's no doubt though when he's on the field and healthy, he's absolutely elite and just makes so many different plays.
I mean, to be fair, if there's anybody I'd move around, it would probably be this one. I just don't know. But given, if we're speaking in terms of dynasty, he'd be the one like, okay, is it time to go on? Is it time to – I guess it's the perspective of where your team is. Are you going to win now, or are you trying to get something out of somebody? Like, I don't think I'd get a lot of value out of, I don't know, Jonathan Greenard, even though he had a great year. But TJ Watt, that's a name that pops. I could probably get a couple pieces to run my team with. And this would be the time to do it within the next year or two. But you're right, Joe. If you wait till the season he gets hurt, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and then you start. I mean, if this year Steve wants him at 75%, I mean, if he gets hurt again, he's going to want a 50% discount.
Oh boy, here we go.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. There we go. So number 4, I put Nick Bosa. Okay, Nick Bosa didn't have the greatest year. But he was getting there, wasn't he? He was getting there all year. Team went to Super Bowl. Good for them. But for Nick Bosa, he had a total of 52 tackles. 16 were for a loss. So he's getting the pressure. He's getting the QB hits. He's getting the loss. 10.5 sacks on the season. Good for most. Maybe that's a down year for him. I don't know. But you know what else he had this year? 4 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a trip to the Pro Bowl. Looking at his tape this year, okay, so really those stats don't really do a whole lot of justice. You're like, yeah, big deal, whoop-de-doo, right? But when you look at his tape and maybe some of his advanced stats, those 60 hurries, those 95 pressures, those 35 QB hits, he does all the dirty work for a team. It's no secret they made the Super Bowl. He's only 26 years old with more years to come. Nick Bosa, usually a top 3 in your drafts. So why not put him a top 4 dynasty? I think that's a deal. What do you guys say?
So I had him number 1.
Okay.
At the beginning of the season. I sense we'll have changed that. I think I'm just a little surprised that we have yet to see Myles Garrett's name. So that means you've got Nick Bosa behind Myles Garrett. From a dynasty perspective, you're talking about a guy who's 2 years younger and not the reigning defensive player of the year, but the defensive player of the year prior.
Yep. Anything on Nick Bosa, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's interesting this year, just the fact that he's took a dip in sack numbers, but he's the type of guy, he was getting in there, getting pressured. He's got the motor as well. And his age, I think you got him right at 4 here.
Well, it's interesting too. I think some people were really hoping that Nick Bosa would get even better with the acquisition of Chase Young. But I think for those of you who thought that Chase Young was going to be good, and Joe knows I get caught in the flashy, so I thought that he was going to be all that and a bag of chips, and I was looking for crumbs at the bottom of the bag. So.
What happened to Chase Young? I thought that was going to be such a nice pairing. Those dudes playing each other in college, coming in the NFL, high draft picks. I was hoping a little bit more. But even if he doesn't re-sign, Nick Bosa is a fixture there.
Oh, absolutely. I just think that people were expecting that finally that he has somebody on the opposite side that's going to help him to excel even further, have to deal with double teams and what have you. As far as Chase Young goes, I know it's kind of a tangent here, but his career might be over. He might have one more stop, I think. He'll get one more stop. But if I'm him, I'm going to pick a defensive coordinator that I really think is going to get the best out of me and is a really good scheme fit. I think he's got to be really thoughtful of where he's going to go. He's with the Commanders, trade with the Niners. Tape did not look good with the Niners. So his market, I don't think, is going to be very hot. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with him because I don't think he's going to go back with the Niners.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a pretty hot take by you, Steve. One thing he did rebound in the Super Bowl there.
One sack. It was one move. It was one.
I get that, but he got in there for a sack, and it was against one of the best left tackles in football, arguably.
I don't know about that. Maybe if you count all the holding that they're able to do.
That's a whole nother story.
You guys don't stop, do you?
Smith
left for hours and hours, huh?
Guard. He beat him for a sack,
Oh, boy.
All right, moving on to 3, and you kind of guessed who's coming up next. And I'm going to get drugged for this one, but I'm okay. These are my thoughts. They're in my head. I'm going down the rabbit hole here. And the audience, feel free to comment, leave your comments, subscribe to the podcast. I have a bit of a hot take here, depending on who you're talking to with Myles Garrett. Okay, Myles Garrett, he won Defensive Player of the Year, and people are pissed about it. They're like, "What?" I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why I feel better with Myles Garrett, and I'm in the minority. I already know. Look at Steve. He's like this. He's winding up, getting ready to get me. I'm going to tell you why. Okay, Myles Garrett. Okay, before leaving with that injury, I know y'all seen it. He had the sling on his arm, what have you. I'm going to say first 10 games of the season, he was red hot, 13 sacks, 10 games, dominant player all the way through. As soon as he got that sling on his arm, he got a little bit of mulligan from me, okay? The last 7 games here, this makes it even worse. This is where the argument dwindles, okay? He only got 1 sack the rest of the year. But in that moment in 2023, those first 10 games, look at the tape. I challenge anybody. He was the best darn player in the NFL at that time. 28 years old, red hot in his prime. That coach, Schwartz, knows how to get wide 9 defensive end players in the field. I want Myles Garrett. That's a buy for me. What says you, Steve and Joe?
Steve, all I gotta say is, in my experience, doing podcasts, just be prepared for some tomatoes to be thrown your way. The comments could be pretty vicious. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I mean, Steve is one of those guys that was just absolutely appalled that TJ Watt did not get Defensive Player of the Year and Myles Garrett did. But you're not wrong. Watching the first 10 games of the season, Myles Garrett far and away watching all the games, you just always knew it. And the Cleveland Browns, and he was just very dominant. He made his impact felt. I don't really know what happened down the stretch, but he just showed his dominance. And I do agree with you. Jim Schwartz, he found something in him and got him playing. And I love how he changed the alignment as well.
And I'm going to tell you, those first 10 games, he was number one. He was number one throughout in sacks. Once he took that dip, once that sling went on the arm, whatever the heck happened there, we don't know. But those last couple games of the year, he went from number one in sacks all the way down to 7th. So, yeah, looking at a full season, we had guys that passed him, okay? But just for that moment in time, he was in the zone. So I kind of look for stuff like that. You could argue Jalen Phillips too. Jalen Phillips, I don't know how you guys are going to say it, but I don't think he's peaked yet. He's had moments. He's had little glitters, but those injuries and stuff like that, that's kind of stuff that I want to buy into. I want to bet against the injury. These guys are young enough that they'll be able to succeed.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Phillips is going to come back from that injury. He was a guy I was really excited about. Definitely flashed and showed what he could possibly do. Then he gets hurt. That was a real bummer.
Yeah, he was on my bubble. He had 6.5 sacks in 8 games. He was rolling. I didn't put him on this list because, again, it's a tough list to kind of get on. And on that note, let's do number 2 while we're here. For number 2 on my list, I put Mr. Parsons with the Cowboys. He's 24 years old. He just made his Pro Bowl. He's made a Pro Bowl in all 3 years. He's going to be technical, okay? He's a 2-time first-team All-Pro Bowl, Defensive Rookie of the Year. But enough of all that, because we know how those get voted, right? 14 sacks, 64 tackles, and here's why he's one of my faves. 102 pressures on the year. 102. That's a high-level expectation for such a young guy. I don't know. It would take a lot for me to take him up. Now, I go, granted, tackle-savvy leagues, you might have an issue. I play him at DL. I chase those sacks. I'm willing to take the good with the bad, especially with a 24-year-old player. Where do you guys have Parsons ranked?
This one's close. I go back and forth on it. I believe that Parsons is the number 1 guy, though.
Okay.
I think that based on what he has a higher tackle floor. Right? He's had 64 this past year, 65 the year prior, 84 the year before that. He's not playing. He kind of was playing a combined role. He's playing a little bit in the inside for inside linebacker, going on the outside as well as an edge rusher. He's been more exclusively edge of late. I know, Joe, you don't like that as much. But his sack totals have been 13, 13.5, and 14. for me, and it's an age thing, guys. I mean, he's 24 years old, right? I mean, you're talking about we're going to be talking about him here not too shortly, unless you got a surprise at number one, Steve. But if Maxx Crosby is 26, I think you could go. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I just lean towards Parsons.
Mm-hmm. And that's our number one. Let's go to our number one here because I have a couple questions when we're finished. For our number one, it's Maxx Crosby. I mean, shoot, the last couple of years, he's now in his 5th season. I had to look that up. He's 26. Okay, he's on his 3rd consecutive Pro Bowl. Okay, he was 1st in tackles for loss and 2nd in tackles. I don't know what happened. Did he get hurt? Because he was like the number one tackle guy, and then he ended up with 88, but still 2nd's still good. So how was 1st tackles for loss, 2nd in tackles, and 3rd in sacks with 13.5. But again, it's a remarkable feat what he's been doing, logging all those snaps. And I kind of put a stat out here. I put this on Twitter earlier. Crosby becomes the sole defensive lineman since 2000 to achieve 85 plus tackles and 20 tackles for a loss in back-to-back seasons in 2002, 2003. I mean, for me, what more do you want out of a guy? That's a must-add to me on my teams. In fact, he's probably too high. These 5 here are probably too high to even get right now. What says you guys about Maxx Crosby?
Here's my argument against that, though. Is that sustainable? I understand he's done that in the past 2 seasons. Can he do that for, let's say, the next 3 seasons and have it be 5 straight? That's where a lot of his value has come. And I'm not so sure that he'll continue to do that. I mean, it's very strong. His highest sack total was 14.5, and then the year prior was 12.5. So he had his best year as far as sack total wise. But he's not. Parsons has had higher sacks. Over those first 3 seasons. So to me, I think that is more likely that he'll continue to do that. Tackles, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I don't. As far as Maxx Crosby goes, I don't see why can't he? I mean, this guy nobody works harder than this guy. Nobody wants it more than this guy. Nobody's hungrier than Maxx Crosby. That's what just amazes me. And he doesn't have the help along the defense like Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons playing with way better talent along the defensive line than what Maxx Crosby gets in Las Vegas. It'll be interesting to see what the change in D coordinator, if that affects Micah Parsons at all, because I really do think the Cowboys do him a disservice by not moving him around, because too many times if you just run at Micah Parsons, you can take him out of the game. I mean, the Bills really showed that if they don't get bigger linebackers and bigger guys up front, you just kind of run at him and you can take him out of the game and get him off balance and then pass over top of him.
I don't think Zimmer's going to move him around, Joe. I mean, if it had been Rex Ryan, I would have been more likely, but I don't think Mike Zimmer's going to.
Yeah, then it's too easy to take him out. I mean, too many games I saw where he just didn't have that impact.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's good takes, guys. And that's what makes me nervous with a lot of these guys on this list. Sometimes they're hit or miss. I mean, any given week, that's what you're going to expect with younger players. I would say playing Dynasty, IDP, as long as I think you can get a good understanding of players' window. Age is a thing, yeah. Snaps and tackles. You kind of gauge that each year, but you're right, Steve and Joe. Sacks are fluky. I mean, we don't know what to expect. Look at Bosa this year. Look at Hutchinson. I mean, there's a lot of effort to get in, to get to that play. So, we got to take a lot of that into consideration,
Definitely.
I did have a question for you guys on this top 10 list that we just did. Just to recap for the audience, number 1 was Maxx Crosby. We did number 2, Mike Parsons. Number 3 did Myles Garrett. Number 4 we did Nick Bosa. Number 5 we did T.J. Watt. Number 6 Aiden Hutchinson. Number 7 Josh Allen. Number 8 Kayvon Thibodeaux. Number 9 Will Allen. Number 10 Brian Burns. Just out of curiosity, what players would you be buying and what players would you be selling if those were our top 10 dynasty players?
I'd be selling Josh Allen. I would try to be able to see he just got out that 17.5 sack season. It's the perfect time for guys like, you two that would be willing to take him off my hands, and I could get a good value for him. So I would go with Josh Allen as my sell. I don't know how hard it would be to do it, but my buy is Will Anderson. I think Will Anderson has the ability to be a top 3 pass rusher in the league. And at this point, he's not there yet. He has signs that he could be. And so as a result, maybe you could get him for not as much. It's hard for me to say you buy Parsons or you buy Crosby, right? In a dynasty league, it's not going to happen. Like Joe, for example, had Maxx Crosby. He traded him, but the primary reason why he traded him was because we're in a salary cap league. So because of the salary and contracts and his overall salary cap, Joe was forced to kind of be like, I got it. I'm in such a bad situation. I've got to kind of trade him and kind of collect picks and figure that out. So, that's a whole different situation. But in a dynasty league where I don't have player movement doesn't have to happen. If I'm a Parsons owner or if I'm a Crosby owner, even if I'm I guess Garrett or Watt, maybe you feel like, okay, if I'm trying to rebuild, but I just feel like those top guys could be hard for you to buy.
Yeah. I mean,
counterpoint real quick though. Yeah. If I talk to 10 people on the street, they're probably not going to know Josh Allen had this great season. Wouldn't you think you can get more value out of a TJ Watt than a Josh Allen in a smaller market?
It's possible. I guess it depends on how active your league is. I mean, if your league is active enough, or if they just say, hey, I'm looking for an edge rusher, and they see that he's in the top, I mean, it's not going to take too long for them to look into it. Watt's got the name recognition. So does Myles Garrett. So I think you could try to sell those guys. I would just, in my view, I would just try to capitalize on it. See if I can't get some. I would probably reach out to how I typically do things is I'll let the league know I'm looking to trade him, and then I'll probably message each one of them and say, hey, you interested? And then we start talking.
That's definitely how you operate, Steve. But yeah, I'd be looking to sell high on TJ Watt, and definitely like Brian Burns is a buy low candidate just in case. I mean, at 25, if that we'll see if he switches teams or not, but 25, if he has that breakout right now, you could get him for a lot less than you can if he does have that breakout season we're expecting.
Gotcha. Anybody else on the list that you guys were thinking, you're like, man, Steve missed this guy in the top 10? Is there anybody else out there that you would consider Dynasty top 10 DL?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that some of the guys I had possibly within my top 10 were guys like Hassan Reddick and Matt Judon. Obviously, Matt Judon, he had his injury. I think it was a biceps injury that took him out for the year. And then Reddick didn't have as strong of a year. And then there's like, does he want to get traded? No, he wants an extension. Like, who knows what's going on there.
He says he didn't request for the trade.
I know, but it's mixed messages right now with those guys. So, but I would say, I think they would be on the periphery for me, but that's where I'd put Hunter in the top 10. I'd bounce Burns, but I don't think either one of those guys. Bradley Chubb would have been an interesting name had he not torn his ACL. I mean, he really, took the league by storm. I wouldn't have put him on there, but people might have gotten really excited about him.
Yeah, Hunter definitely for me as well. And then the only other guy possibly I think would be Jalen Phillips. Possibly could see him throwing in there, but I think it's just tough with the injuries that we've seen and don't know how to come back from. So I totally get why he's not in the top 10.
Yeah, this was a really good episode, guys. I really appreciate you guys coming on. Defensive end, defensive lineman, edge position. It's always a good investment because these guys usually just streak up the board. So I think we got the right top 10. We might have it in a different order. Hey, guys, tell my audience where they could find you.
Yeah, so you can follow myself and Joe, or Joe, I'll let you speak for yourself, but you can follow me at Steve_FOP on X. We also have Front Office Pros at Front Office Pros. You can follow us on X as well. We post videos on YouTube we do roughly around 3, sometimes 4 a week. So if you wouldn't mind heading over there, and if you enjoyed our banter tonight, we talk IDP as well. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and we're also on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
And like Steve, you can find me on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and that's at Joe_FOP.
I'm telling you guys, you're in for a treat. You guys got to check these guys out. I'm on their show. They're on my show. It's great. I feel like I'm not a third brother. I'm more like an uncle. I'm an older uncle with gray beard. But I love being around these guys, man. You bring such good energy, and you're always ahead of the curve, which is hard to do out here. A lot of people like to copy, paste, and stuff. So I appreciate you guys coming on. Appreciate your insight. Here at Fantasy Six-Pack, I just want to say this one more time. We got a promo code going, F6P MLB 24. Save 15% off. You'll get all the award rankings. Joe Bond's a top 3 ranker. He's got assembled an awesome team. And then you're stuck with me over here on the Fantasy Six-Pack. I'll be doing the rankings and the waiver articles for time to come. But Steve, Joe, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for giving us your insights. I appreciate you, and I'll see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.